Well, hello, and thank you very much for joining us on this webinar. It's my privilege to be joining Head Teacher Chat for this. And I've chosen quite a provocative title for this webinar, which is Values, Reality, or Wallpaper. And I've been inspired to choose this title by something I've been doing for a while now, which is going into schools, primary and secondary, spending a day in and out of lessons around the place, just like a fly on the wall, if you like, as far as possible, and giving the head teacher or leadership team feedback at the end of the day about how consistently the school is teaching behaviour. And that led me really to have lots of conversations with head teachers about this, because it could be difficult to get into every area of the school a lot of the time. There are constraints, things happen. And we could talk about what our values might be or should be, though, of course, I think that's probably another webinar. I'm going to assume a relational approach. I'm going to assume that relationships are important to you, that respect is important to you, and perhaps some other things similar to that. And I'm going to think about, well, are they understood? Are they heard? How do they relate to learning and teaching, and a few of those things, okay? First slide, please, if you will.
Thanks,
thank you.
Steve. So for those of you who are joining us to watch this webinar, I'm just going to introduce you, Steve. Sorry, I'm going to probably embarrass you by saying that there aren't many people in this world who genuinely care and who really get it. So if you're in a school and maybe you are new to this whole values thing, because that's quite scary, or maybe you're in a school where the values aren't quite right, that can be overwhelming and it can be very upsetting. Steve is one of those people who completely understands it and who completely gets it. You guys are going to love this session with Steve. So I'm going to let Steve share his screen. I've read his book. It's here. If you haven't read it, I really recommend it. If you've got any questions, please let us know. You can send me a DM in the chat and I will pass them on to Steve. But really enjoy the session. Grab a pen and paper and I'll see you in a bit.
Thank you, Lucy. So here's my titled slide. I thought it important to have one. As you'll see, the book is mentioned in the bottom right-hand corner. I'll have one or two quick things to say about the book at the end. And if you are able to wait for the end, you'll find the screen crops up that gives you a nice little discount on multiple copies. But that, of course, is entirely up to you. So with no more ado, I'll ask, can we please take away that slide and I'll come back. And let's start by thinking about those values and are they understood by everybody? I think that's the first question I'd like to ask. Are they understood? This little girl came up to me in a school in Yorkshire. It was a primary school. She was about 9 or 10 years old. She came walking up to me. She said, "They've made a new rule now. We're supposed to be happy," which I thought was hilarious. And it suggested to me that the school had been not quite clear about the relationship between values and rules and outcomes, because my experience tells me that your values are the things you believe in, the things you think are important about young people and about education. And then your rules, hopefully simple ones, we'll come to that later, are the ways we need to live, the rules we need to live by in order that people experience those values and feel them and see that they're real. And then there are outcomes, the ways in which learning improves, the ways in which life for children and the adults in your school improve because we live by those values. And so I always look twice when I see words like resilience included as one of the values or even one of the rules. Like, you must be resilient. Strikes me as a little odd, because resilience to me is an outcome. If we all do our jobs right, if we all bear in mind that these are children and we are supposedly, as Paul Dix would put it, stable, resilient adults, then children become more resilient. And if we do certain things in the way we arrange learning and teaching, we teach them to fail and all that, they become more resilient. But I would see it as an outcome. So you'll have your own debates with your staff, with your leadership teams about what those values might be and should be. But I think that model of values simple start that again. That model of simple rules that grow from your values and lead to outcomes is perhaps an interesting one to have in mind. And it's about looking for those times in the school where the actual lived reality and the declared values are in conflict. I'm thinking of a secondary school I was in recently, which shall of course remain nameless, where it was they had a sort of form tutor time. It had another name, but it was form tutor time. And they were using this time to deliver the PSHCE. And these students, in a number of cases, were sitting with form tutors with whom they had very scant relationship, atomized around. There was only about 12 students in this group. And they were working their way through these workbooks that were about emotional health and well-being. And in some of these lessons, there was no real relationship with this tutor, and they clearly were did not have trustworthy relationships with each other. And yet it was right. Well, what are the features of mental health? Positivity, right? Yeah, write that one down. And it just struck me there was this huge chasm, in fact, a conflict between the way these children must have felt being asked to address their emotional health and well-being and the format in which it was taking place. I worked with another secondary school in Yorkshire years ago where the head had put up a poster around the place that said, "This is a school that cares, CARES." And I've forgotten, in the midst of time, I've forgotten what the C, the A, the R, the E, and the S stood for. But this was in a school where his big hitter deputy was, no, he wasn't a deputy. The behaviour leader, let's say, was an old-fashioned ball in their face guy who spent his time, well, that's it, balling in children's faces. And it did not feel like a school that cared. Staff need to understand the mission. It's, I was in another school recently talking to the head about meet and greet, and he said, well, we've told them to do it. Okay. How do you know it's going on? We'll talk later about monitoring and evaluation. But there's always a new level of explicitness, if that's a word, that we need to go to make sure staff have really understood. I have so many times visited lessons and found a member of staff standing at the door as the kids walk past them. And I said later, I noticed you were at the door. Can you tell me a bit more about that? What? Oh, well, I don't know. Leadership told us to do it. And you might think you've explained it really carefully, but there's always another level of explicitness, that new word I've made up, to go to. Staff who are asked to do something different. So rather than in secondary form tutor time, it becomes home time or guardian time. And we think by changing the name that they're going to realize, right, I need to have a slightly different relationship with these young people. It needs to slightly be a different ethos, a different feeling in the room. They won't get that unless it's made really, really explicit. And they need to understand that their own behavior is the deciding factor. Their own behavior, my behavior is the only thing I'm in control of. And if they understand that, then your staff can become behavior leaders, not just managers. So then they're part of a team that's leading behavior by example, that's acting out your values, that's talking relentlessly about them, which brings us to my second point, which is, by the way, I'm not going to put up a PowerPoint until I ask you to stop and reflect. So that won't be long, but I will do it. On the lips, not just the walls, is my next little slogan. I sometimes go into schools and I see these big words, usually secondary schools, these aspiration, inspiration. I've never yet seen perspiration, but it wouldn't surprise me if I see it one day. And in my cheekier moments, I've said to leadership teams, are these the banned words? Because I'm not hearing them in lessons. So if these words aren't translated into classroom practice, then they're meaningless. And actually, they're worse than meaningless, but we'll come to that. You also go to schools where there are quotes everywhere. You can't walk down a corridor without seeing above you something that Gandhi once said, or a quote from Shakespeare, or a quote from is it Maya Angelou? Is that the name? I mean, I'm picking that one out of the memory banks. I may have made that name up. I hope not. But you see these quotes and you think, well, meanwhile, kids are trooping by. Members of staff are pulling them up about their shirts and their ties and their shoes and running and all the rest of it. And I don't see anyone mentioning these quotes. So I'm going to ask you to think for a moment. I'm not going to put up a slide here and ask you to stop, but I'm just going to ask you to think for just a moment. If there's that gap between, if we put up this stuff that promotes these positive, imaginative, creative, loving takes on what it means to be human, and none of the staff ever mention it or refer to it, what's the effect? I think that's worth thinking about. And, you know, SLT need to be explicit and they need to devote CPD time. And if you're in Wales, that's HMS time, as I'm finding out. They need to devote that time to unpicking this stuff in detail and bringing it out for staff that they need to be, that these words need to be on the lips. I once worked with Alan Yellop at Wakefield City School, and that was a privilege. And he told me, this was back in the day when staff were, when senior leaders would walk down the corridor and they'd look through that little porthole in those old-fashioned doors that some schools still have. And they'd look to see if there was a learning objective up. And if there was, they'd sort of give a tick and just keep walking. Or they go in, I suppose, into the room. Some just look to see, is the learning objective up? Alan Yellop told me, I don't want to see it up. I don't care what's on the board. I want to be hearing it. I want to be hearing it from the staff. I want to be hearing it from the children. I want to know what that learning objective is because it's what they're actually talking about. And I think the same thing applies to our values. And my third little heading for myself is that they need to be promoted in every conversation about behaviour. And here's where the rules come in. Schools have lots of rules. Some schools have dozens of rules. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. You know, teachers are very fond of saying what they don't want. I was a teacher the other day. This is another thing I do. I sit in lessons and give teachers developmental feedback at the end of the day. And this early career teacher, she said, I don't want to see any, what was it? I don't want to see anything thrown, or I don't want to see this, that, or the other. I forget what it was that she said, but I don't want to see it. And I said to her later in my feedback, I said, I don't suppose you wanted to see any belly dancing or fire swallowing or knife throwing either. And she looked at me strange. I said, well, the thing is, the list of things you don't want to see is, if you think about it, it's endless. Let's tell them what we do want to see. And the best way to do that is to have just 3 values-based rules. There's something about a rule of 3, isn't there? Young, gifted, and black. Yeah, he drops off the tongue. I won't be able to think of another one. But, you know, the rule of 3 is a thing in English. Trust me, I was an English teacher way back in the day. Because when schools have 5, they can never remember them. So there's 3 simple values-based rules. You know, responsible, safe, be your best, ready, respectful, kind, whatever it's going to be. Those are an opportunity for the staff to pull together, because then every time we pull up a child about their behaviour, intervene, talk to a child about their behaviour, we're going to relate it to one of those rules. Yeah, but yes, that may be, yes, but was it safe? I need you safe. You know, yeah, I understand that, Kai, but was that respectful? Let's keep it respectful. So every time you pull up a child about the behaviour, you're able to relate to the values-based rules, and therefore you're relating to the values every time. And then for member of staff, instead of going around the school trying to win little arguments with children, and let's face it, some kids have got a black belt in arguing, haven't they? They're able to be part of a unity of staff that is promoting the way we do things here by referring to simple values-based rules. And the great thing about these is you can use them proactively as well as reactively. It doesn't have to be just when you need to intervene. It can also be, right, year 8, we're going to do some, year 5. Right, year 5, we're going to do some a peer assessment now. How will I know you're being respectful? What will I see you doing? What will I hear you saying that's going to tell me you're being respectful? And then you're in the plenary at the end of the lesson, you can be saying, now then, year 5, how did being respectful help you carry out that peer assessment? How did it help you learn? And we can start to build it into learning and teaching. So it becomes not something that's as well as all the stuff that we need to do, but it's something that becomes part and parcel of it. Now then, what I'd like you to do, please, could we have the next slide, please? That's it, the one after that, please. Thank you. Here's what I'd like you to think about. I'd like you to consider, what are your values? And if I came to do that behaviour walk, what would I see that would tell me that those were the values? What would I see and hear around the place? And how well do your staff understand their part in modelling those values, which of course is easily the most important part. There's what I say to you, but then there's what you see me do. That's how our children learn from us, isn't it? As I know to my, as I know as a parent. Right, I'm going to leave you with those for maybe 5 minutes just to have a think. Bring me back now, please. Thank you. Thanks very much. I hope you found that reflection time useful, and I'm sure that will have provoked some thought. I hope so, and that you'll have some useful conversations with colleagues after this podcast. Meanwhile, a podcast, a webinar. Meanwhile, I want to talk about routines, because routines are how children learn, aren't they? I'm a granddad now. Well, in fact, I'm a tide, because I'm living in Wales. My partner is Welsh, so we are not grandma and granddad. We're nine and tide. So I'm a tide. So I'm learning by watching my son teach his children, and they're very, very good with those routines. And it just reminds me how important they are. And perhaps the most important routine of all is the meet and greet. I've been to primary schools where it's done fabulously well. I went to one in Edinburgh, in a very deprived area, and saw these children lining up, and the member of staff there with a smile, with warmth, a genuine smile, a genuine welcome, and marked on the inside of the door was a piece of flip chart paper which had been divvied up into, I think, 4 or perhaps 6 different possible welcomes. I think it was 4 welcomes that these children could choose from. Do you want the hug? Do you just want the smile? Do you want a handshake? Do you want a high five? I'm making those up, but it was something like that. And then every classroom had this is the 21st century, a large TV screen with a video of a roaring fire. But believe it or not, it did make a difference. It did feel welcoming. But the importance of the meet and greet came home to me. Actually, funny enough, it was on that trip, because I have a lovely lifestyle. I'm very, very lucky. I live on a farm in Wales, and I try not to complain about my lifestyle, because when I was a teacher, I would have killed for it. But sometimes the travel can be extreme. My partner and I drove down. She drove me down from North Wales to Southampton on the Sunday night. I did the job at the primary school in Southampton on the Monday. She then drove back. I got the plane up to Edinburgh and did 2 days in that particular primary school, and then got a plane down to Stansted in Essex, hired a car, did Thursday and Friday in the secondary school in Essex, and then got the train home by getting a train into central London, the train home on the Friday night. Now, by midweek, I think it was Wednesday night when I arrived at Stansted, I was on my knees, and I remember queuing. I remember so vividly. I'm queuing, and there's a young woman behind the desk dealing with all these people, and I'm there to hire a car. Now, I hate hiring cars, because I feel like I'm going to get, what's the word? Stuff might happen that I don't like, and I'm suddenly gripped with this thought that I'd pay an extra 35 quid if she'd smile when she deals with me. And I don't mean this in a sexist way. I would have felt exactly the same way if it was a man. I just was suddenly overwhelmed with this feeling that I needed to be greeted with a smile. And then I thought, OMG, if me, deep in middle age, needed to feel welcomed and safe, I really did have this big moment. You would have heard the penny dropping wherever you are in the country. You would have heard the penny dropping at the time. OMG, if I need to feel so welcome and safe in middle age with a happy family and a successful professional life, how badly do these children need to feel welcome and safe at classroom doors? It really struck me. And some of you will have heard about the footballer, Ian Wright, now a football pundit, and how he used to, he was soccer mad as a child, and his father was so abusive, he would make Ian watch Match of the Day, but with his back to the screen. He'd make him be in the room, but force him to face away from the screen. And there were times when Ian's elder brother used to clamp his hands over Ian's ears at night to prevent him from hearing the domestic violence that was raging downstairs. And you think, what kind of a welcome did Ian Wright need at school the next day? No wonder his PE teacher was so important to him. So that meet and greet, but staff need to know exactly why. They need to understand the power of their own modelling. And then, of course, we need to make sure it's happening, but we'll come to monitoring and evaluation in a little bit. But that first meeting, because children that, some of you will be working not only to improve behaviour, but you'll be thinking about persistent absence too. And you think about those children that are lying in bed first thing in the morning, thinking, what's my first interaction with an adult going to be like? They probably wouldn't express it like that, but that's basically what they're thinking. Can I be bothered? Other words are available. Can I be bothered getting off this mattress and fixing my own breakfast, looking for my own school uniform, possibly sorting out other siblings, doing all this other stuff I have to do, all these other hoops I have to get over before I can even engage with the education process? Can I be bothered doing all that if the first person I'm going to see is going to criticize my uniform, is going to tell me you'd better be better than you were yesterday, or something like that? I was in a school in Plymouth. I do get around. And this time it was a secondary school. And there was some lads walking from one block to the other. And there was like a covered walkway. And I was with the behaviour lead. And she said, oh, James, tuck the shirt in. Thank you. And let him go. In fact, I don't think she used his name. I think she just said, excuse me, tuck the shirt in, thank you. And then she looked at me like, didn't I do that well? And I sort of smiled. But it wouldn't have hurt her to have said, James, because it was Monday morning, how's your weekend? Oh, glad to hear it. While you're there, can we model politeness? Can we model respect in the way that we go about things? Because going back to the first part of this webinar, if the value is respect, and yet our staff are actually less respectful than they frequently are on airports. If you think about it's sometimes when I've queued up to get through passport control or through through various hoops you have to go through to get on a plane or off one these days, the way that staff speak to you is sometimes more kind and more present and more genuine than the interactions you have with some staff at some school gates and classroom doors. And that needs addressing, I think. Also, the thing about routines is they can actually rob us of meaning. There's this slant thing going around, isn't there? The T stands for tracking. I forget the rest, but then it seems to me that when I've seen it in place, often the tracking is the only bit that gets mentioned. Strange that. And I was in a classroom in a very successful big city secondary school and watching form time. And this teacher was saying this stuff and I couldn't catch it because it was something like, it's like 3, it's like 2, it's like 1. And I'm at the back making notes, what's he saying? And then the penny dropped. He's saying slant in 3, slant in 2, slant in 1. Which is something, it's coming back to me, something about stop what you're doing, listen, But all of that meaning that is packed into this slant thing was completely lost. I mean, okay, we can talk about slant and whether it's a good thing. That's another webinar. But putting that to one side, it had just become a posh version of shush. So routines can actually rob. I was in a primary school and it was glorious. It was in Greater Manchester. And there's this reception teacher who the head told her she's leaving us at the end of this term. But she was, there was this song that they had to sing. So all of these lovely little children on the mat and the teacher is going something like, we are caring, we are kind, we keep everyone in mind. But the way she was doing was something like, we are kind. It was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Of course, these poor little children didn't notice. Well, not consciously, they didn't. And it made it the point to me that we have to be careful with routines. They can rob our interactions of meaning just as much as they can actually teach behaviors. So they need to be approached with care, but they are vital. And I can't get off the subject of routines without thinking about how you gain attention. How do your staff gain the attention of children? And how do your children gain the attention of staff? I see so much. Guys, please, excuse me. Hello. Thank you. And the problem is that the kids are at the back of the room thinking, well, I've seen signals for attention. Number 1, 2, and 3. I think I'll see what 4, 5, and 6 are before I try listening. It's completely ineffective. Much better to have an established routine. When I see people sort of tidying up their desks or walking across the classroom while they're going 3, 2, 1. Well, of course the kids don't listen. You wouldn't do stage hypnotism like that. So thinking about how routines are delivered is really, really vital, as well as making sure they exemplify the routines. Exemplify the values. Yeah. They really must exemplify the values, and they must support the authority of staff. I need you to take a seat, rather than, can you please, would you mind? Which makes us look weak. Let's be in charge. Let's care. Let's love the kids. Let's be in charge. Now, another thing about these, we'll stop and reflect soon. One more little package from me first. We've talked about these routines and them being on the lips, but it's about them being noticed. My personal formula for helping staff become behavior leaders rather than managers is to say, let's teach the behaviors we want to see, let's model them in our own behavior, and let's highlight them when we see them. And that's where we are right now. It's about highlighting those values when you see children act in ways that are that exemplify them. And it's counterintuitive because we are hardwired to spot what's going wrong. If you're a member of staff and somebody turns their head to speak to a peer at the wrong time, excuse me, it's human nature to look at the fly in the ointment. It's also human nature, of course, to predict what's going to happen, to be aware that Chelsea can sometimes be distracted, and so be hyper vigilant to Chelsea throughout the entire lesson and pick on her. I saw it happening just the other day with a child. I won't mention the name, but it was just 2 initials, and like a CJ or a B. I forget what it was, but it was this same child. I said to the member of staff at the end of the lesson, let's call her Bobby Joe. I've made that up. Let's call her that. On one thing, Bobby Joe's the student in your class who gets it right most often, right? She's the one that you're most pleased with? She went, no. So, well, thing is, I noticed that you interacted with her. Well, you talked to her at least far more often than you did to anyone else. Were you aware of that? Because if that happens, A, we act unfairly because other children will be doing the same thing and we'll miss it. And B, we're giving these children the impression that they're the most important people in the room. Everyone's important to us. That's one of our values, isn't it? That you're all important. Every young person in front of us is important. Notice it. If we believe that respect is important, we want to be highlighting the students who show respect. If we believe that being responsible is important, we need to highlight responsible behavior when it happens. Nice one, Jake. That was a great way of taking responsibility. Bill, when you opened the door, that was a great way of showing respect to our visitor. Highlight them constantly and be aware of over-rewarding the 5%, the ones who struggle to behave. Sometimes you wish they'd struggle a bit harder to behave, I know. Be wary of over-rewarding them because, again, that demonstrates values to the rest of the class that aren't the ones you want to demonstrate. It's about being consistent, and it's about rewarding the behaviors, not the children, in a sense. And another thing, schools spend huge amounts on complicated reward systems where you get a ticket for a raffle for a mountain bike that's going to be pulled next April, drawn next April. much better to just get a thumbs up and a well done from someone you trust. Much better to get that moment of connection. And it's those little moments of connection where the adult is genuine, like that. Nice one. Great stuff, Bill. That's when it really pays. That's when you're really connecting. That's when you're making a deposit in the emotional bank account with that child. So it's about noticing and acknowledging constantly the positive behaviors that are going on in the room. Now then, I have covered a lot so far, probably too quickly, forgive me. Hopefully you'll be able to rewind this and replay it, I guess. I don't know. Should you want to hear it twice, that's another matter. But I've covered a lot. I want you to stop and think now, because in your role as leaders, of course, you're thinking about, those of you that are school leaders, you're thinking about, how do I make sure this happens? Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. I want you to think about monitoring. Is it going on? Is it happening? So is meet and greet actually happening? Are the staff there? When I walk down the corridor, do I see the staff at their classroom doors? And not just when Ofsted are in or when we've told them that we're looking for it. And evaluation, how good is it? How are they doing it well? And then accountability. If they don't do it, what happens? So here are some questions to think of, and you know, you'll generate your own questions for yourself from that. But here, in case you need it, here's some other thoughts. Right, what is your evidence base? Where are you getting your information from? If you were to prepare something to tell me about how, or any other visiting person about what your values were and how successfully they're being applied and embodied, would it be the quantitative stuff, the stuff you can count, or would it be the qualitative stuff, the stuff that you can't count but you can still see and hear? Would you include staff voice, student voice? Pardon me. Another vital part of accountability is, are your middle leaders on side? And are your middle leaders holding the difficult conversations that need to be held? Because quite rightly, and it's a wonderful thing, staff in school become friends. Sometimes those things can get in the way of tackling things that need to be tackled. And think about all the other elements of school life that you are tasked with leading. Is the action you want to take on value, that you take on values, is that working in harness with other developments, or is there any conflict? So again, I'm going to stop for 5 minutes or so just to let you reflect on that. Thank you. Can you bring me back, please? Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you. I hope you found that reflection time useful. Not far from the end, but a few more thoughts. Modelling, staff modelling. The importance of modelling was brought home to me, and this story's in the book. I changed the name of the parent. I don't know why, but Mrs. Baines sits down in front of me in my second year of teaching. Richard Baines, she says, oh, nice to see you again, Mrs. Baines. I said, and I took her through all the usual stuff. And then as she was about to leave, I said, one thing, Mrs. Baines, Richard is getting a bit giddy. She said, oh, you say Richard's giddy? I've just been speaking to Mr. Varley, who was his maths teacher and had been teaching for a long time and was a very calm, a very safe pair of hands. Says, Mr. Varley says Richard's quite calm. But then Mr. Varley's quite calm, isn't he? And I thought, OMG. Everything I want my children to be, I have to be. I wanted at that time to be Mr. Jokey, whiz-bang, flash, crazy, in your face, and then expect them to whenever I wanted them to. And of course, that's just not realistic. And again, the big penny dropping moment. And I realized this, as I've said already, I need to be everything I want my children to be, the children in my care to be. So that was a big learning curve for me. And when staff model these values, how do you model respect? How do you model responsibility or safety or kindness or whatever it is? That needs a lot of discussion, a lot of thought, a lot of CPD time, and a lot of coming back to. And it needs to be done with this thing, what I would call a restorative mindset. It really jars when people say in my hearing, oh, I've got to go and do a restorative at 3. Because it's not doing a restorative. It's not a thing you do, restorative practice. It's a thing you be. You have a restorative mindset. You say to yourself, these are children. I'm a responsible, resilient adult. Right? If you're anything like me, I can on a good day with the wind behind me, I'm a fairly good impersonation of a stable, resilient adult. But I don't need to take it personally. I don't need a pound of flesh. I don't need revenge. I don't need to see them sorted out. I need to help them learn. I need to support them to find what they need. That's a different mindset. It's a way of seeing the world as they go about the school on duty, as they sit in their lessons, as they come into assembly. Everything they do, they need to be teachers of behavior leaders, who teach it, model it, highlight it as part of a whole school team who are doing the same thing. And part of this modeling, of course, is that SLT need to model it for the staff. So they need to feel it from you. They need that gentle arm on the shoulder, real or metaphorical, that tap on the shoulder and, hey, saw what you did there. Love that. You're doing a good job. How often do your staff get told they're doing a good job? When my head teacher said that to me as a head of year, that kept me going for 9 months, 10 months, maybe a year. That was massive. And it took her 5 seconds to do. So maybe going out as a leadership team, maybe saying, right, today we're all going to find 3 people we think are doing a great job. We're going to tell them so. Massive effect. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me, I do apologize. That's not what you want to do when you're leading a webinar. I happen to have hay fever, but hey, big deal. There are worse things. So that modeling by SLT is massive. You can't spread peace and love with Stalinist methods. Some have tried, but it can't be done. SLT have got to model it. I know sometimes you'll still need to make decisions that staff won't like, but there are ways and means of doing things, aren't there? Now, could we have the next slide, please? Lucy, thank you. Excuse me, I do apologize. Before I say a couple of things about the book, I want you to now reflect. on this whole podcast, I've talked about values being understood by everyone, those values being on the lips of all the staff all the time, not just on the walls, about them being in every conversation about behaviour that takes place, about those values being supported and exemplified by consistent routines, and about staff working with a restorative mindset. And I'll throw one other thing, is that some staff are great at making relationships with young people and some aren't. How do you build relationships with young people? There's a whole chapter on that in the book. And it's something to do with that drip, drip, drip of deposits in the emotional bank account, the little positive things you say. So how good are your staff at that? There's something else to think about. But right now, I'm going to leave you with these personal action points for a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to come back and just very briefly talk about the book before I hand you back to Lucy. So 2 minutes with these. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you, Lucy. I hope you found that time to reflect useful. I just want to very briefly talk about this book of mine, that behaviour book published by Crown House. We've had the fantastic review on that head teacher chat provided a link to on schoolleaderbooks.com, I think it was. And it's made me think I should talk about the book a bit more than I have been. So how might you use it? And here are some ideas. It's a sort of book, because it's divided into chapters that have things like values, routines, rewards and other consequences, expectations, and so on. It lends itself to, I hope, to mentoring and coaching situations where staff can use the book as a resource for that. It's also a place where you will find some scripts and other approaches that could become consistencies for your staff. There's stuff in there that will help you when it comes to time-honoured issues in schools, like staff taking responsibility and passing kids up the food chain too quickly. There's stuff in there you can use to address that. It's been designed, this is the way I designed the book, for use with groups of staff in a reading group situation, where some of you will be involved in those sorts of groups in your personal lives. So you read a chapter of the book, and then I suppose in the reading groups you read the whole thing. But in this setting, you might read a couple of chapters, meet every fortnight to discuss what you've seen. A great way of bringing on what you've read. Great way of bringing on your ECTs. It can also be used, as I know, for established staff who, as I've put it here, have established habits. It's for staff who are good but tired, because there are many of those, because this is a very, very stressful and challenging occupation to be in. Hopefully it can be used to, well, as I've written there, to inspire and inform, to be a starting point, a catalyst. That's the word I'm looking for, a catalyst for cultural change. I should have put that there. And you also might use it in your SLT meetings to just to make your values explicit with the SLT, because of course they've got to share that. I've been to so many schools where the SLT are not really quite united, and if they're not, then it makes progress very difficult. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is my my penultimate slide, not my last, my penultimate slide. And this is what I do in person. I come in and I do those behaviour walks, as I mentioned earlier. Obviously, I come in and I do whole staff CPD as well, or CPD for identified groups of staff, whoever. And another thing that I do is to get into relationships with schools and work on coaching individual staff and helping them. Now, I don't mean coaching in the for some people, coaching is like a religion, isn't it? It's a very specific thing. This is more, it's a blend of coaching, mentoring, passing on experience. I'm just going in, seeing several staff in a day, and then giving those staff feedback at the end of the day. I use coaching as shorthand there. Last slide, please, Lucy. Thank you. And so here you are. There's a code for the book here. So if you want to, and you have your phone handy, you can copy the QR code and get a big fat 30% discount there. So I hope you found my ramblings useful today. Whenever you are able to watch them, I hope you found them useful. You've seen that my email address is on one of the previous slides. So I'd be delighted to hear from anyone who's got questions. Thank you. Well, so on that note, I will hand you back to Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you. That was me changing the slide then. I was thinking I was going to show your email address, but it wasn't on the slide before. What is your email address, Steve? We'll pop it on the screen for everyone.
Yes, I think it's on it's steve.baker.
Yeah.
484 @btinternet.com. Thank you.
Oh, Steve, that was absolutely fantastic. What a privilege it is to have you come and talk to us. I told you all it would be really, really helpful. I've taken loads of notes. I absolutely love your book, Steve, and I love how you write as well. It felt like it feels like you're in the room with us when you're reading it. It's a really good book, and it's written from the heart. So if you are interested in finding out more, I really recommend you take a look at the book, especially with a big fat 30% off. That's pretty impressive. And here's Steve's email address. So if you'd like Steve to come and see you in your school, then you can get in touch. And thank you so much, Steve. Really, really appreciate it. What a useful session.
A huge pleasure, and thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, I hope you have a good day. And if you have any questions for Steve and you'd like me to pass them on, please do get in touch. Thanks, everybody.